Hi, my name is Mike McHugh, and I'm the Director of Communications for the International Cotton Advisory Committee. Welcome to the video series we're calling Get to Know the ICAC. We created it not just to help people learn more about the organization, but how to get more value from the information and services that we provide to our member governments and to the global cotton community as a whole. Although the ICAC was founded more than 80 years ago, these last few years have brought about a lot of change for us. We've become a more active and dynamic organization, especially with our work on the ground, where we're literally changing the lives for millions of people around the world. As a result of all those changes, we felt it was important to reintroduce the ICAC to the world. So these videos we created are going to address all aspects of the organization, from our history and founding in 1939, all the way through the development of our most cutting-edge technologies, and everything in between. In each episode, one member of the Secretariat will address a different aspect of the ICAC and how it works. And by the end of the series, you won't just know more about the organization, you'll know how to get the most value possible from the work that we do. So we're thrilled that you're coming along with us on this ride, and without further ado, let's get to know the ICAC.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Matthew Looney, and I'm the data scientist for the International Cotton Advisory Committee. Today, we're going to talk about the ICAC's data dashboard, kind of what it is, and how to use it. So to get started, the first thing you need to do is navigate to the ICAC's main webpage, which is simply www.icac.org. If you scroll down a little bit to the data portal, click on that. It will take you directly into the data portal or the data dashboard. And this is the main page of the data dashboard. A couple of housekeeping items before we actually get started with the explanation on some of the functionality. To get back to the ICAC's main webpage, you can simply click up in the upper left-hand corner on the ICAC logo, and that will take you back to the ICAC's main page. Again, we'll go back into the portal. You can also read a little bit about the idea behind why we created this data portal. Just quickly summarizing, basically what we wanted to do was to get the ICAC's more than 80 years of cotton-specific data into your hands directly. And as we work through the dashboard, it'll become a little bit more clear some of the things you can actually do with the data. But previously, we were publishing these reports in either static PDF documents or Excel tables. And again, we'll go over some of the functionality of why it may be better to use the dashboard directly. You can read a little bit about the ICAC's data science team. This is very much a collaborative effort between myself, Lorena Ruiz, which is the economist for the ICAC, and Parky Vatz is the trade analyst for the ICAC. So this was a collaborative project between largely the three of us, although the entire ICAC group contributed. The three main contributors were myself, Lorena, and Parky. And you can read about our backgrounds a little bit on this About Us page. So with some of the housekeeping items out of the way, we'll start into the functionality of the dashboard. There are a couple of different types of data that are housed here: supply and demand tables, import and export data, some tools, again, the output, the About Us section, and then the Contact Us section. And the final housekeeping point I'll mention is if you have any questions, suggestions, complaints, or praise about the dashboard, you can just click on the Send Email Now link, and that will send us an email with any comments you may have. So kind of getting started with some of the functionality. Again, we have supply and demand, import, export, and various tools, and we'll go through each of these in turn. The supply and demand, if you click on the supply and demand, you'll see global supply and demand, regional and country level supply and demand, balance sheets by season, and then the top end countries. So the global supply and demand is just what it says. It's the current global supply and demand outlook for the world. For the 22-23 season, again, this will be season specific. So the current season that we're in, the ICAC takes the season as being August 1st to July 31st. So if we're in that August 1st to the July 31st, 2022-23 season, as we are, you will see the current position of the global cotton supply. The color is going to indicate the movement from the previous season. So for instance, we can see 22-23 is not a particularly good season by many measures. Area is red. That indicates that the area is down from the previous season. Yield, global production, all down. Beginning stocks, imports, consumption, and exports, all down. Ending stocks are up, and supply to mill use ratio is up. That's in green. There is a third color, yellow, which indicates a static position. There is no change from the previous season. We'll see that as we dig into the regional statistics. So you can get a quick glance of what's actually going on in the world in terms of cotton. You can also plot this, and we have various variables that you can plot from the beginning of our time series data, which is the 1940 to 1941 season, through the current season, 22-23. You can get a quick picture of what that looks like over time. So this is plotting. Here's blue, area in 1,000 hectares and production in 1,000 tons. If you're interested in a different variable, let's say you're looking, you're interested in the global yield from 1940 to the current season, you can simply unclick area in production and click on the yield or whichever variable you're interested in. Again, just click on the variable that you're interested in. It will automatically plot that time series from 1940 to the current season. You can also get a tabular representation of this graphical picture here down in this table. So this is showing the most recent 5 seasons. If you're interested in seeing the entire global position back to 1940 in tabular format, you can just expand out that 5 records to show 100 records, or basically every record that we have in our database. You can print it on paper, although I'm not quite sure why you'd want to do that. You can do that, or you can download these tables directly in Excel or CSV format by just clicking on that tab. It will download it to your desktop or wherever you want to put it. And then you can open up that file after it's downloaded, and you can manipulate the data further. If the simple plots that I'm displaying here in the dashboard are not sufficient for your purposes, you will have the entire global position in tabular format back to 1940. You can play around with the data to your heart's content. And so that's pretty much the global tab, global supply and demand tab. We can move on to the regional and country level supply and demand, and that's just what it sounds like. So it looks very similar, in fact, quite identical to the global supply and demand, except we have an additional tab here that you can pull down to get regional aggregations or individual country level dashboard positions on what global cotton is doing, or what cotton is doing in an individual region or country. So again, color indicates position from the previous season. North America is kind of a mixed bag in this representation, although largely down. Everybody in this 22-23 season is down in a lot of regards in terms of production area, imports, consumption, and exports. We have various levels of aggregation. So we have North America, or various aggregations: North America, Central America, South America, North Africa, the entire continent of Africa, C4+1, C4+2, Central Asia, so on and so forth. And then we have individual countries represented here. So every country that's in our database, certainly the major players in cotton production and trade are represented in this this page here. So for instance, we want to look at Bangladesh. They're a large importer of cotton. They do a lot of textile production in Bangladesh. We can click on Bangladesh and we can get, again, statistics back to 1940, although prior to 1970, there wasn't much happening in terms of cotton in textile production in Bangladesh. But we can see that through this, both the dashboard view, the graphical plots, and again, the tabular data. Same functionality as we had with the global position, except this is on a country or region specific position. So if you wanted to pull down this data on Bangladesh back to 1940, you could do that. One important thing to mention before I move on, and we'll talk about another country, is if you want to download the data directly to your desktop, what you see represented here is what you will download. So just for instance, if you click on the CSV tab and you have 5 records shown, 5 records from Bangladesh, it is only going to download those 5 records. So that's great if you're looking for the past 5 seasons. But it's just important to note, if you want the entire data set, you need to expand out back to 1940 and then download, click on the CSV or Excel tab to download that entire data set to your desktop. So again, so we see green, increase from last season, red, decrease from last season, and here yellow, it's static. There was no change from the previous season. Again, if you know the country that you're looking for instance, the United States, USA, you can just type that in with your keyboard and it will pull that up. If you're interested in, let's say Brazil, it will also autofill. So just start typing in BRA and it will auto-populate Brazil for you. And then one final is Pakistan. And this is Pakistan's 2022-23 position at a glance. Again, unfortunately, a bad season for cotton production in Pakistan. They had some pretty catastrophic floods in the 22-23 season, and we see that reflected here in the dashboard with a red color on production, indicating that it's quite down from the previous season. One final thing to note on the regional and country specific is that you can see the last time that the data was updated. This is important if you're routinely following a country and you visited the website a week ago. You want to go into the website today. Has the data on Pakistan been updated? You can see here the date, the last date that the 22-23 season was updated was in February 16th of 2023. So that's a quick way to see if the data has changed since the last time you viewed the dashboard. We'll move on to balance sheets by season. So this is a fairly new tab that we've added. And this is basically the entire 22-23 season. All of the countries and the aggregate regional aggregations are represented in one table. So for instance, we see Canada, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Mexico, and the United States. The current 22-23 season, production area, yield, beginning stock, imports, consumption, exports, ending stocks, and stocks to use. And then you'll see the individual aggregations. So this is helpful if you're looking at a disaggregated view of global supply and demand. You'll see the season here, so you know, especially when you download it to your desktop, as you can do here with the CSV or Excel tab, you'll know which season you're looking at. Active is basically a flag for our database. For instance, countries like Zaire or the USSR, which were active and are no longer active. This is a flag that we use to indicate active status or inactive. Market year, again, is going to be the same as the season, 22-23, and then the market year start and the market year end. That just reiterates the point that the ICAC's cotton season is August to July. Again, the revised date, so you can look quickly and see when was the last time the data was revised. The United States was April 5th, and Jamaica, there's not much that happens in Jamaica in terms of cotton, so that has not been updated recently. And again, you can scroll down to the bottom, you can see this is the entire ICAC balance sheet view by season. And then the final far right-hand column here is the sub-T flag or the subtotal flag. Again, this is when you download it to your individual desktop and you want to play around with the data a little bit more. If you want to get the global position, you can just filter out this column by ones. The aggregations are indicated by 1, country level statistics by 0. And then global has a 2 on that sub-T flag. And then the last tab in this supply and demand is giving you a view of the top end countries in any given variable. So for instance, this is the 22-23 season. We're looking at the top 10 countries in terms of area, yield, production, consumption, imports, and exports. So that's kind of what that means. We can change this, both the season and the end countries that we're looking at. So let's say we want to just look at the top 5 countries, just simply slide over that slider to 5, and we get the top 5 countries for 22-23. If we're interested in looking at, I don't know, let's see, 2010, 2011, we can see the top 5 countries in 2010, 2011. The top 5 producing countries in that season were China, India, the United States, Brazil, and Pakistan. Again, you can download the data in CSV or Excel format if you want to play around with it more on your local machine. And you can go up to the top 50 countries in terms of area, yield, production, and so forth. You can also download. So let's say you are making a publication or a presentation. You can you can do a couple of different things. You can take a screenshot of this plot, or you can download it directly to your local machine as a PNG file, and then use that in further reporting or presentation. So that's top end countries. We'll move on to imports and exports. Again, so this is the import and export tab. You'll see the about, the import and the export sub tabs here. Please click here and read first. So this is here for a reason. And basically what it's doing is it is stressing the point that this import and export sub-tab, this import and export section, does not represent the official position, the official trade position of the ICAC. If you want the official trade position, then you need to come to the supply and demand table and either look at the global imports and exports, or the country and region-wise imports and exports. Okay, so that's important. I'll just mention that one more time because it is important. The information that's displayed here in the imports and exports does not represent the official trade balance of the ICAC. What this data is representing is it's an algorithm that the ICAC has developed. Again, this was a collaborative project with Lorena Ruiz and Parky Vats. And Parky will do one of these info sessions specifically on trade and the algorithm and how it was developed and how it's used. So I won't go into too much detail here, but I will just mention that the algorithm that we've developed, the point of it is to aggregate information from different trade groups or entities into one location. So what this actually allows us to do is we will come in and we will view this import and export data, and then we will analyze that and plug in a final number into the supply and demand table. So what this algorithm is actually doing is it's looking at UN Comtrade data, it's looking at ITC trade map data, and it's looking at TDM or trade data monitor data. And it's aggregating all 3 of those various sources together into a single view here. And again, Parky Vats will go into more detail about how that's actually done. But basically what this algorithm is doing is taking those three data sources and it's aggregating them and displaying them here in this representation. Um, so it's not the official trade position, although the information that's displayed here in the import export sub tab, or this import export tab and the import export sub tabs, it's a piece of information that we then analyze and feed into the official trade position of the ICAC. Most of the time, it's going to be pretty close because those are the three primary sources of information that we use to arrive at an official trade position of a country. Although we also do and preferentially obtain direct information from the delegates or the research entities in an individual country. So this is not the final word. This information is not the final word. It is this information is then taken in conjunction with any additional information we have, again, preferentially direct information from the import-export country, and then a decision is made on the official position. So with that kind of disclaimer out of the way, we'll just talk a little bit about this tab here. You can select an individual country or various individual countries. So let's look at Pakistan and Vietnam. Those are two importing countries, or countries that are going to have some number of imports on them. Again, you can select the importing countries. You can either select it from the pull down menu, or you can, if you know the country name, you can type it in on your keyboard and it will auto populate. Be careful though, because we have two countries with a BAN. One is Albania, one is Bangladesh. I was actually meaning to type Bangladesh instead of Albania. So we see here, we have three different importing countries: Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Pakistan. We can see who exported to those countries. So Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Pakistan are the importing countries. And we see into Bangladesh in the 2020-2021 season, we see that the primary exporter to Bangladesh was India. The primary exporter to Vietnam was the United States in this particular season. And it looks like the primary exporter to Pakistan was also the United States in the 22-21 season. We can come down and we can select the most recent season, which is 22-23, although the 22-23 season has not closed yet. So this information that we're displaying here is highly variable, meaning that it is expected to change, and it in fact will change before the end of the season occurs on July 31st. But at any rate, we can kind of look at what is, quote, the current position of the 22-23 season for these three individual importing countries. Interestingly, we see the primary exporter into Bangladesh, or Bangladesh primary import partner, is Brazil. It looks like Pakistan is still the United States. And very interestingly, it looks like the main exporter to Vietnam is in the 22-23 season is Australia. So we did see a little bit of a shift between those seasons in terms of imports into these three countries. Analogous, before I move on, I want to show you that you can display the data in, well, obviously we were looking at it here in graphical representation, but we also have it in tabular format. So you can download this information on the import, who the importer is, who the exporter to that country was, the season, the quantity, and then the value of that cotton lint. This threshold for imports. So for instance, if you want to see, well, let me go back. If you, this was the original view at 10,000 tons. When you look at the tabular view, you'll see this other category. What this slider bar up here does, it's kind of the threshold. So anything less than 10,000 tons is going to be put into this other category. Okay. So if you want to decrease that, meaning you want to show importing countries less than 10,000 tons, then you can scroll to the left on that slider bar and you'll see here that the other categories are shrinking, meaning that you're seeing more individual countries showing up here on this tabular format. Conversely, if you want to show fewer countries, you can increase the threshold. So that means that anything under 50,000 tons is going to go into the other category. And in fact, we can see that the other category is now increasing. So this is actually handy, for instance, if you want to show just the primary trade partners with an individual country. So if we were down in the 10,000 view, we would see it shows quite a few more countries. If we're up in the 50,000 threshold region, we show fewer countries. Again, this is handy if you were going to be displaying this in a publication, and you don't want your pictographic representation to be too jumbled with lines. Again, you can download this tabular data, you can print it, you can download it in CSV and Excel formats. The export tab is exactly the same as the import tab, so I'm not going to spend any time on this other than to say that it is identical to the import tab. The same pictographic representation, the same way of selecting countries, the same way of selecting the individual season that you're interested in, and the same threshold measure. Okay, so we'll move on to tools. Under the tools tab, we have a couple of sub-tabs again. We have a cotton season calendar. And what this is showing the various sowing, growing, and harvest periods for various countries. So for instance, we can see Argentina, the Chaco region, or the Santiago region of Argentina. You can see when their sowing, growing, and harvesting time periods are. You can look down, let's see, in Brazil. Brazil's a southern hemisphere producer. So we can see when are they sowing, growing, and harvesting their cotton. So you are going to see some variance in this cotton season calendar. It's pretty useful to get a quick idea of who's sowing, who's harvesting throughout the year. And again, we have the major producers in this cotton season calendar. Convert bales to metric tons. This is a useful tool. The ICAC represents our production and trade in terms of metric tons. For instance, the USDA represents theirs in 480-pound bales. So a conversion would be required if you want to do a one-to-one analysis. We have various bale weights. So if you're looking at Pakistan, which has a 170 kilogram or 375-pound bale weight, you just simply pick whichever country you're looking at. Pakistan, the United States, India is also 375 pounds. Egypt is a bit different, Mexico, although the big ones that you're going to be using are basically Pakistan and or India, and the United States, or at least those are the big ones for me when I'm doing my analysis. And then in this number of bales, so for instance, let's say we're converting 200 bales from the United States into metric tons. So we'll see 200 is equal to 43.5448 metric tons. So the next tab is the compare USDA database to the ICAC database. So this is actually interesting. Again, this is a tool that I used on a fairly regular basis, and I thought it might be useful. So we included this in the dashboard. What this is doing is it is doing a side-by-side comparison between what the USDA's position is for instance, area, production, imports, exports on any given country in their database. And that compares that side by side to what the ICAC's position is. There are going to be some differences. They should not be large differences. So you will see some differences, although in the United States, the data is between what the US reports and what the ICAC reports is mostly going to be one-to-one. And we see that here in this plot. The USDA's database goes back, at least their public version of the database goes back to 1960. So that's as far back as we can go in terms of our side-by-side comparison, even though the ICAC's database goes back to 1940. The USDA's public database goes back to 1960. So this is downloading the information directly. Whenever you log into the dashboard, it is automatically going to the USDA database, downloading their data, automatically going to the ICAC database, downloading our data, and then displaying it in a side-by-side format. So this is, if you will, quote, real-time positions for our two balance sheets. So you saw I can slide it to the left, slide it to the right to get more or less information displayed. Again, this is the United States. If we want to look at, let's say, India. If we want to look at India, just either find India in the pull-down tab or auto-populate India when you start typing on your keyboard. It's important here that you click Update View. And you can verify that we are now looking at India because India is in the country down here in the far left-hand column. And we see the USDA year and the ICAC year. Those obviously should be the same. And then area, yield, production, beginning stocks, imports, consumption, exports, ending stocks, and stocks to use ratio for the various organizations. So we do see, again, just quickly looking, that the USDA's current production for India is 5.33 million tons. And for the ICAC is 5.2 million tons. So again, close, a little bit different, as I would expect, because we have differing opinions on production, consumption, and trade. But again, there should not be a large variance. And if you want to see that in graphical form, you can see, we're tracking, the two of us, the two organizations are tracking each other quite closely. There is some variance. And depending on the country and depending on how far back you go, there may be more or less variance. So it looks like, although we're looking at more data, so some of the variance gets smoothed out a little bit. Let's look at, let's say, 1980 to, let's look at the 80s, basically, to 1989. And it's almost 1-for-1. So very, very close, with some minor variance here, 1988-89 season. Again, you can download this data, and you're going to download it in turn. So this tab here above the USDA is going to download the USDA balance sheet for India. And then the CSV download tab is going to download the ICAC's data for India. So that's important to note, although you will have the notation in the headers here, which data you're actually looking at, ICAC or USDA. But the download of the data is an option. And that largely concludes this info session on how to use the ICAC's dashboard at a quick glance. I anticipate that we'll go into a bit more depth in subsequent videos of this nature, but this was the inaugural video, if you will, to kind of give you a quick introduction to some of the functionality of the dashboard. And then, of course, as we release new versions of the dashboard with increasing functionality, we will make these videos to explain that new functionality in turn. So if I'm anticipating a new version of the dashboard will be released this summer. At that point, we will create another video summarizing some of the basic functionality, but then explaining in more detail some of the new functionality that we are offering. as we are constantly improving this dashboard. And that leads me to the conclusion. I will only say that if there is a feature that you are interested in, please reach out to us at this contact us, and let's start a conversation. I am interested in increasing the functionality of this, not just for me, but for you. So whatever you can dream of, there's a high probability that we can work together to incorporate that functionality that may make your job easier or help to explain something in greater detail or in a different way. We have tried to think of how you might engage with this data. Although, again, we're 3 people, we're a small group. You may have better ideas than what we've managed to come up with. So please send us an email, call us, communicate with us at any time. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope you find this useful. Thank you very much.